The gym smelled of sweat and steel, but her touch was fire. I froze, her hand lingering on my wrist, guiding my form through a deadlift. Her voice low and steady. Keep your core tight, Emma. In that moment, under the flickering fluorescent lights of Iron Pulse Gym, something shifted, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. My name is Emma Carter, 25, a graphic designer who'd spent years hiding behind sketchpads and computer screens in Portland, Oregon. I wasn't athletic, not by a long shot. My body felt like a stranger's, soft and untested, until I walked into Iron Pulse 3 months ago, desperate to feel something other than the gnawing ache of my breakup with Josh. He'd left me for someone more exciting, he said, and I'd been spiraling ever since, questioning everything me worth, my desires, my place in the world. The gym was supposed to be my reset button, a place to rebuild myself, one rep at a time. That's where I met Riley Kane, my trainer. She was 27, all lean muscle and quiet intensity, with short brown hair that fell just above her sharp jawline and eyes that seemed to see through me. Riley wasn't like the other trainers, all bravado and barked orders. She was different, patient, deliberate, with a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Her sessions were tough, but her presence was warm, like she was coaxing strength out of me I didn't know I had. I'd catch myself staring at her sometimes, at the way her arms flexed when she demonstrated a move or how her laugh lit up the gym's gray walls. I told myself it was admiration, nothing more. I wasn't that kind of person. Or was I? That day, her hand on my wrist felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. The gym was nearly empty, just the hum of a treadmill in the corner and the clank of weights being racked by a lone lifter. Riley's fingers were firm but gentle, adjusting my grip. You're stronger than you think, Emma, she said, her voice softer now, her hazel eyes locking onto mine. My breath hitched. I wanted to pull away, to run from whatever this was, but my feet stayed rooted. Her touch wasn't just about correcting form, it was something deeper, something that made my heart race and my thoughts blur. I'd grown up in a small town outside Portland, where different wasn't a word people used kindly. My parents were good people, but their world was black and white. Girls liked boys, got married, had kids. I'd never questioned it, not out loud. But in high school, I'd had a best friend, Sarah, who made my stomach flutter in ways I couldn't explain. We'd spend hours lying on her bedroom floor, talking about everything and nothing, our hands brushing as we passed snacks. I buried those feelings, convinced they were wrong, a phase. When I moved to the city for college, I dated guys like Josh, trying to fit the mold. But Riley's touch was unraveling all of that, stitch by stitch. You okay? Riley asked, stepping back, her hand falling away. I nodded too quickly, my face burning. Yeah, just tired. It was a lie, and she knew it. Her lips curved into a half smile, like she was holding back a secret. Take a break, she said, tossing me a water bottle. I caught it, our fingers brushing for a split second, and my chest tightened again. What was happening to me? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my tiny apartment, the city's hum filtering through my window, replaying that moment in the gym. Her touch, her voice, her eyes, they haunted me. I'd always thought I knew who I was, Emma, the quiet artist, the good daughter, the straight girl who just hadn't found the right guy. But Riley was rewriting that story, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to read the next chapter. The next session, I showed up early, my nerves a tangled mess. Riley was there, setting up equipment, her movements precise and effortless. She glanced up and smiled, and it was like the air shifted. Ready to push it today? She asked, her tone teasing but kind. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. We went through the workout squats, lunges, kettlebell swings, but every correction, every adjustment, felt electric. Her hand on my shoulder, her voice in my ear, "You've got this." I didn't know if she meant the workout or something else entirely. By the end of the session, I was sweating, not just from the exercise. Riley handed me a towel, her fingers grazing mine again. "You're doing great, Emma," she said, her voice low. "You're different." The word hung between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to ask what she meant, but my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. Instead, I mumbled a thank you and bolted for the locker room, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. That night, I sat at my desk, sketching furiously. I drew Riley her strong jaw, her steady gaze, the way her hands moved with purpose. The lines on the page felt like a confession, one I wasn't ready to voice. I didn't know what this was: attraction, admiration, or something more, but it was real, and it was terrifying. I'd spent my whole life trying to be someone else's version of perfect. What if this was who I really was? And what if Riley saw it too? The gym became my battleground, not just for my body, but for my heart. Every session with Riley felt like stepping into a storm, thrilling, disorienting, and impossible to escape. I told myself I could handle it, that I could keep these feelings locked away. But every glance, every touch, was a crack in my carefully built walls. A week after that first electric moment, I arrived at Iron Pulse Gym to find Riley waiting by the squat rack. Her usual confidence softened by something new: nervousness. Maybe. She wore a black tank top that hugged her frame, her arms crossed casually, but her eyes were searching when they met mine. "Hey, Emma," she said, her voice warmer than usual. "I was thinking we could try something different today. Maybe some partner stretches." My stomach flipped. Partner stretches meant closeness, meant her hands on me again. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We moved to a quiet corner of the gym, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. Riley guided me through the stretches, her hands steady but gentle, adjusting my posture, her fingers brushing my back, my hips. Each touch sent a jolt through me, and I wondered if she felt it too. "Relax into it," she murmured, her breath warm against my ear as she helped me stretch my hamstrings. I tried to focus on the movement, but my mind was a whirlwind. Was this just her job, or was there something more? After the session, Riley didn't let me rush off like I usually did. "Hey, want to grab a smoothie at the cafe next door?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes intense. I froze. This wasn't part of the trainer-client script. My instinct was to say no, to retreat to the safety of my apartment, but something in her gaze held me. "Sure," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The cafe was small, with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh fruit. We sat across from each other, sipping smoothies. Mean mango. Hers Kaylin talked. Not about workouts or form, but about life. Riley told me she'd grown up in Seattle, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs. She'd found solace in sports, then in training others, helping them discover their own strength. "It's not just about lifting weights," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "It's about finding who you are under all the noise." Her words hit me like a punch. I wanted to tell her about the noise in my head, the doubts, the fears, but I didn't know where to start. Instead, I told her about my art, how drawing was my way of making sense of the world. She listened, really listened, her head tilted, her smile soft. When I mentioned my breakup with Josh, her expression shifted, a flicker of something: jealousy, concern, crossing her face. "Sounds like he didn't deserve you," she said quietly. My cheeks burned, and I looked down at my smoothie. stirring it to avoid her gaze. Did she mean that the way I hoped she did? Back at my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I pulled out my sketchbook and drew her again. This time from memory, her leaning forward at the cafe. Her eyes bright, her hands wrapped around her glass. The lines felt bolder, more honest. I was falling for her, and it scared me to death. I'd never felt this way about a woman before. Not like this. It wasn't just attraction. It was a pull, like she was a piece of me I'd been missing. The next session, I was a mess. I dropped a dumbbell, tripped over a mat, and could barely meet Riley's eyes. She noticed. Of course. "You're off today?" she said, her tone gentle but probing. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head, but she didn't push. Instead, she suggested we end early and go for a walk. We ended up at a park near the gym, the air crisp with autumn. The trees were ablaze with red and gold, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. We sat on a bench, watching leaves fall. Riley broke the silence. "You don't have to tell me what's going on, Emma, but I'm here if you want to." Her voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability in it, like she was offering me a piece of herself. I wanted to tell her everything, how her touch made me question everything I thought I knew, how I was terrified of what it meant. But all I managed was, "I'm just figuring things out." She nodded, her hand resting on the bench, inches from mine. I could have reached out, but I didn't. Not yet. That night, I lay awake, my heart racing. I couldn't keep running from this. Riley was more than my trainer. She was a mirror, showing me parts of myself I'd buried for years. But what if I was wrong? What if I was reading too much into her kindness, her touches? And what if I wasn't? The thought of losing her, of ruining whatever this was, made my chest ache. But the thought of never knowing was worse. The line between fear and desire is razor thin, and I was teetering on the edge. Every moment with Riley felt like a dance, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, her pull drawing me closer while my doubts screamed for me to run. But running wasn't an option anymore. The gym, her presence, had become my gravity. It was a rainy Tuesday when everything changed. Iron Pulse was quieter than usual, the Portland drizzle keeping most members away. Riley was waiting for me by the pull-up bars, her usual black tank top swapped for a deep green one that made her hazel eyes glow. "Ready to try something new?" she asked, a playful edge to her voice. I nodded, though my heart was already racing, not from the workout, but from her. She introduced me to a circuit pull-ups, push-ups, and sprints on the treadmill. Her hands guided me through each move, her touch lingering just a second longer than necessary. When I struggled with a pull-up, she stood behind me, her hands on my waist, lifting me slightly. "You're almost there," she whispered, her breath grazing my neck. My arms shook, but not from the exercise. I wanted to turn around, to face her, to ask what this was, but fear glued me in place. After the session, she didn't suggest the cafe or a walk. Instead, she grabbed her jacket and said, "Come with me." It wasn't a question. We ended up at a small bookstore a few blocks from the gym, its shelves crammed with used paperbacks and the smell of old pages. Rain pattered against the windows as we wandered the aisles, Riley pulling out books and reading passages aloud, her voice low and intimate. She handed me a worn copy of Giovanni's Room, her fingers brushing mine. "This one's heavy, but it's worth it," she said, her eyes searching mine. I didn't know the book, but her look told me it wasn't just about the story. We sat in a corner of the bookstore, sharing a single chair because the place was packed with soggy patrons. Our knees touched, and neither of us moved away. She talked about her first love, a girl in high school who broke her heart. I didn't know who I was back then, she said, her voice raw. Took me years to figure out I didn't have to hide. Her words were a mirror, reflecting my own confusion, my own fear. I wanted to tell her about Sarah, about the feelings I'd buried, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I asked, "How did you know that you were you?" She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. I stopped fighting it. I let myself feel what I felt, even when it scared me. Her hand rested on the table, close to mine. I could have reached out, could have crossed that line, but I didn't. Not yet. Back at the gym the next day, the air felt different, charged. Riley was quieter, her touches more deliberate. During a plank, her hand pressed lightly on my lower back, correcting my form. "Stay strong," she said, but her voice was softer, almost a plea. I looked up, and our eyes locked, the gym fading away. For a moment, it was just us, the world holding its breath. That night, I couldn't draw. My hands shook too much. Instead, I Googled Giovanni's room, reading about its story of love and identity, of a man torn between who he was and who he thought he should be. It felt like a message from Riley, a challenge. I texted her, my fingers trembling, started the book. "It's a lot." Her reply came seconds later. "Good. Keep going." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about a book. The next session, I was bold or reckless. As we finished, I lingered, wiping down equipment I'd already cleaned. Riley watched me, her expression unreadable. "You're stalling," she said, half teasing, half serious. I took a deep breath. "Can we talk? Like, really talk?" Her eyes softened, and she nodded. We ended up in the gym's break room, a cramped space with a coffee maker and a sagging couch. I told her about Sarah, about the feelings I'd buried, about how her touch made me question everything. My voice shook, but I kept going, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. Riley listened, her face open, unguarded. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I see you, Emma. I've seen you since the first day." My breath caught. She leaned closer, her hand hovering near mine. "You don't have to have all the answers. Just don't run from the questions." Her words were a lifeline, but they also terrified me. What if I wasn't ready? What if I never was? I was falling, and there was no net to catch me. Riley's words in the break room echoed in my head, a constant hum beneath my thoughts. "I see you, Emma." For the first time, I felt exposed, not in a way that made me want to hide, but in a way that made me want to be known. The gym felt different now, like every corner held a memory of her touch, her voice. Our sessions were still intense, but there was a new undercurrent, a silent agreement that something was shifting. Riley's corrections were softer, her smiles more frequent. During a kettlebell swing, her hand grazed my hip, and she didn't pull away. "Perfect form," she said, but her eyes said something else. I wanted to ask her what this was, what we were, but fear kept me silent. I wasn't ready to name it. Not yet. Outside the gym, Portland was slipping into winter, the air sharp and cold. I started meeting Riley for coffee, for walks, for anything that wasn't just training. We talked about everything: her dreams of opening her own gym, my sketches, our fears. She told me about coming out to her mom, how it took years for them to rebuild their relationship. I told her about my parents, how I'd always been their good girl, afraid to disappoint them. Each conversation felt like peeling back a layer, revealing more of myself, of her. One evening, we ended up at a dive bar near the gym. the kind with sticky floors and neon signs. We sat in a booth, nursing beers, the jukebox playing some old Springsteen song. Riley leaned across the table, her voice low. You ever think about what you really want, Emma? Not what you're supposed to want, but what you want. Her question hit me like a wave. I'd spent so long trying to be what others expect a daughter, girlfriend, artist that I'd never asked myself that question. I don't know, I admitted, my voice small. But I think I want this. I gestured vaguely between us, my heart pounding. Riley's eyes softened, and she reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine. Then let's figure it out, she said, her voice steady but vulnerable. My chest ached with the weight of ethop, fear, possibility. The next day at the gym, I was distracted, dropping weights, missing cues. Riley noticed. Of course. You're in your head, she said, guiding me to a bench. Talk to me. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her how she made me feel alive, terrified, confused. I told her I'd never felt this way about anyone, let alone a woman. Her face was unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled, a real, unguarded smile. You're not alone in this, Emma, she said. I feel it too. Those words changed everything. The gym, once my escape, became a place where I confronted myself. Riley wasn't just my trainer anymore. She was my mirror, my challenge, my possibility. But with that came a new fear. What would this mean for my life? My family, my friends, the world I'd known. They all felt like a tightrope I was about to fall from. We started spending more time together outside the gym. One night, she invited me to her apartment, a small, cozy place filled with plants and old records. We cooked dinner pasta with too much garlic and laughed until my sides hurt. As we sat on her couch, her arm brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. She looked at me, her eyes searching, and before I could overthink it, I leaned in and kissed her. It was soft, tentative, but it felt like coming home. Her hands found my face, and she kissed me back, slow and sure. The world didn't end. It began. But the high didn't last. The next morning, I woke up in a panic, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if my parents found out? What if I was wrong about myself? What if this was just a phase, like I'd told myself about Sarah? I left Riley's apartment before she woke up, leaving a note that said, "Need some time. I'm sorry." I couldn't face her. Not yet. I needed to figure out who I was without her reflection. The gym felt empty without her. I skipped our next session, then the one after that. Riley texted me. Her message is kind but worried. I'm here when you're ready. I wanted to reply, to run back to her, but doubt held me back. I spent days sketching, filling pages with her face, her hands, her smile. Each line was a question. Was I brave enough to be myself? Running from Riley was like running from myself, exhausting and futile. I'd spent a week avoiding the gym, avoiding her texts, avoiding the truth. But the truth was in my sketchbook. In the lines of her face I couldn't stop drawing. In the ache in my chest that grew with every day I stayed away. It was a freezing December morning when I finally returned to Iron Pulse. The gym was decked out in tacky Christmas lights. But Riley was there, same as always, setting up equipment. She saw me and froze, her expression a mix of relief and caution. "Emma," she said, her voice soft. "You're back." I nodded, my throat tight. I needed to think. I said, "I'm sorry I ran." We didn't train that day. Instead, we sat in the break room, coffee cups between us, and I told her everything. How I'd spent my life trying to fit a mold that never felt right. How her touch, Her presence had cracked that mold open. How I was terrified of what it meant to love her, to love a woman, to love myself. She listened, her hand resting on the table, close but not touching. When I finished, she took a deep breath. I'm scared too, she admitted. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Her words broke something in me, something I'd been holding onto for too long. I reached for her hand, and this time, I didn't let go. We talked for hours, about fear, about love, about what it meant to be us in a world that didn't always understand. Riley told me about her own journey, the rejection she'd faced, the strength she'd found. I told her about my parents, how I wasn't ready to tell them yet, but I wanted to be. She squeezed my hand. You don't have to do it alone. That night, we went back to her apartment. We didn't kiss, didn't rush. We just sat together, her head on my shoulder, the quiet between us louder than words. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not perfect, not certain, but real. The next few weeks were a blur of discovery. We trained together, laughed together, built something together. I started drawing again. Not just Riley, but myself stronger, bolder, truer. I told my best friend, Mia, about us, bracing for judgment. Instead, she hugged me and said, You look happy, Emma. Really happy. It was true. I was. Telling my parents was harder. I drove to their house one Sunday, my stomach in knots. They were confused, then quiet, then tearful. My mom said, We just want you to be happy. But I could see the struggle in her eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Riley was there when I got back, waiting with open arms. You did it, she said, and I felt stronger than any deadlift could make me. Months later, Riley and I were still training, still learning each other, still growing. The gym wasn't just a place to work out anymore. It was where I found myself, where I found her. We weren't a fairy tale, there were still doubts, still fears, but we faced them together. Her touch, once a spark, was now a flame, steady and warm. I didn't have all the answers, but I had her, and that was enough. One evening, as we left the gym, snow falling softly outside, Riley took my hand. You're stronger than you think, Emma, she said, echoing her words from that first day. I smiled, squeezing her hand. So are you. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a workout. It was a life, our life, and I was ready to live it.